I paid for my brother's honeymoon with his new fiancée for $14,000, only to have him call me loser at family dinner and say it was cheap. I got angry and cut them off, but then. I still can't believe I let Martin talk me into this. My brother has always been dramatic, to say the least, but when he came to me for help with his honeymoon, I thought maybe this time was different. Maybe he'd finally grown up a little. To set the scene, Martin had just married Heather, a decent woman, surprisingly. His first wife, Belma, had been a total disaster. The kind of woman who thought job was a four-letter word and treated him like a butler instead of a partner. I'd always kept my distance from his relationship drama, but when they divorced, it was hard not to say I told you so. When he met Heather, though, I had hope. She was responsible, polite, and actually had a career in marketing. She also seemed genuinely crazy about him, which was a first. They got engaged after a whirlwind 6 months of dating, and before I knew it, he was asking me to help with the wedding. I said no, it wasn't my place, but I gave them a nice check and thought that was it. Then Martin called me about the honeymoon. He said they'd been looking at a 9-day trip to Hawaii, flights, bungalows on the beach, nice restaurants, the works. But apparently they'd underestimated how much it would cost. He claimed he didn't want to go into debt so early in their marriage and asked if I'd be willing to help out a little. At first I was hesitant. Martin and I have always had a rocky relationship. He's the kind of person who wants the world handed to him on a silver platter and gets upset when it doesn't happen. But Heather seemed to be such a good influence on him, and honestly, I was just happy that he'd moved on from Belma. I thought maybe if I helped them get their marriage off to a good start, Martin would finally appreciate me for once. I agreed. And by help a little, he meant $14,000. I pay for everything: flights, accommodations, and some ridiculously expensive beach bungalows, fancy dinners, and even a few activities like snorkeling and a helicopter ride. It was a lot, but I figured if it made them happy, it was worth it. The weird thing was, once they got there, I didn't hear a word from him. He, who practically lives on Instagram, didn't post a single photo. No stories, no captions about living my best life. Nothing. It wasn't just unusual, it was bizarre. My husband, my parents, even my younger brother V noticed and thought it was weird. Heather had always been annoyed by his constant obsession with social media, so we thought maybe she'd convinced him to unplug for a while. When they returned, I was eager to hear how it went. We'd all agreed to meet at my parents' house for dinner that Saturday, me, my husband, Martin and Heather, our parents and me. When Martin walked in, tan but with a sour look on his face, I had a sinking feeling that whatever he was about to say wasn't going to be good. The moment Martin sat down, the mood changed. He didn't say much at first, just fiddled with his drink and let Heather do all the talking. She seemed relaxed, even happy, as she told us about the trip. The snorkeling was amazing, she said. We saw sea turtles, tropical fish, it was like being in another world. And the helicopter ride over the volcanoes? Unreal. My parents and V took it all in and asked a lot of questions. Even I was starting to feel good about my decision. It sounded like they'd had a great time. Heather showed us some pictures on her phone: the sunset view from their bungalow, a fancy dinner by the water, Martin smiling in a flower lei. So, she said with a grin, it sounds like a pretty awesome honeymoon. My mom chimed in. Your sister really went all out for you too. It's such a wonderful way to start your new life together. Everyone nodded in agreement. I glanced at Martin, expecting him to finally crack a smile or at least say thank you. Instead, he put down his drink, stood up and said, "Are you kidding me?" The room fell silent. A 9-day vacation? That's it. Who does that? Martin snapped. You know what people post online. Month-long trips to Europe. Yacht parties in Santorini. They couldn't even book us more than a bungalow? And don't even get me started on the restaurants, half the places were basic. I blinked, stunned. At first I thought he was joking, but the look on his face said otherwise. You're such a loser, he continued, glaring at me. How could you be so cheap? If you couldn't afford a real honeymoon, you shouldn't have offered in the first place. My husband's fork clattered on his plate. Vee's jaw dropped. Even Heather looked embarrassed. My mom and dad exchanged one of those silent "what just happened?" looks, and the whole table turned to me, waiting for my reaction. I took a deep breath and looked Martin straight in the eye. You're amazing, I said, and then I let him have it. Martin, can you hear yourself right now? I said, I spent $14,000 to give you and Heather the honeymoon of your dreams. $14,000? And you stand here and call me cheap? A loser? Are you serious? He crossed his arms and looked defiant, but I wasn't about to back down. The fact that you even feel entitled to complain about something like that is insane. Do you know how many people would kill for a trip like this? Do you have any idea how spoiled you sound? Martin rolled his eyes, and that was that. Something inside me snapped. I stood up and continued. You want to talk about being cheap? Fine. Let's talk about how you've never paid me back for anything in your life. Not the help with your car when you were in college, Not the money I loaned you to cover your rent when you moved out on your own, and definitely not the money I gave you after your divorce because you said you were struggling. I've always helped you because you're my brother, but this is beyond selfish. You can forget about me ever doing anything like this for you again." Martin's face turned red, but before he could say anything, I turned to Heather. "You're a good woman, but if this is how he treats people who go out of their way for him, you're in for a rough ride." Heather looked like she was going to disappear into her chair. My mother started to say something, but I put my hand up to stop her. "I'm not finished," I said, turning back to Martin. "Let me make this very clear. If you keep acting like this, no one is going to want to help you. Not me, not mom and dad, not anyone. And no, having 11,000 Instagram followers doesn't make you some kind of star, so stop acting like the world owes you something. You're not a prince, and I'm done pretending you are." The room was dead silent. Even Martin looked like he didn't know what to say for once. My dad coughed awkwardly and my mom tried to smooth things over, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I grabbed my coat, looked at my husband, and said, "Let's go." I could hear Martin muttering something under his breath, but I didn't care enough to turn around. I was done. Martin's words echoed in my head as we drove home. I couldn't believe it. 14 grand and he called me cheap. My husband didn't say much during the drive, but I could tell he was as angry as I was. When we got home, he finally broke the silence. "You did the right thing," he said. "But what about Heather? She didn't even try to defend you. She just sat there like a statue." That bothered me, too. Heather had always seemed like the calm, collected type, but tonight she looked like she'd rather be somewhere else. At first I thought she was just embarrassed, but now I wasn't so sure. Something about her expression during Martin's tirade had seemed off. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was my mom. I wasn't in the mood to rehash everything, but I answered it anyway. "He came over," my mom said. "Martin, early this morning." "Let me guess, he's still mad?" My mom sighed. "No, actually. He was crying. He said you humiliated him in front of everyone, and now Heather barely speaks to him." That got my attention. Why would Heather be angry with him? I was the one who left. "I don't know," my mother said. "But he kept saying how everything was ruined and how you don't understand what he's dealing with." That threw me. Martin's life has always been an open book, whether we wanted it to be or not. He overshares everything from his dinner plans to his relationship drama. But now there was something he wasn't saying, and it was eating away at me. When I got off the phone, I told my husband what my mother had said. "I don't know," I said, "but if there is, it's not my problem anymore." I meant it then. Martin had crossed the line, and I had no intention of getting dragged back into his mess. But by the middle of the week, curiosity got the better of me. I checked Heather's Instagram, hoping to get some insight into the situation. Her page was private, which wasn't unusual, but Martin's was suddenly deactivated. That was strange. Martin without social media was like a fish out of water. Then out of nowhere, I got a text from Heather. "Can we talk? Just you and me. I have some things to explain." I stared at Heather's text, not sure how to respond. This was a woman who barely spoke unless Martin gave her permission, and now she wanted to explain some things. To me? It didn't sit right. "Sure. When?" "Tonight," she replied. "I'll come over." That evening, Heather showed up alone, looking more haggard than I'd ever seen her. Her usual clean-cut appearance was gone, her hair was a mess, her shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Thanks for seeing me," she said as she walked in. We sat down in the living room, and for a few minutes she just stared at the coffee table, fiddling with her wedding ring. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" I asked. "For Martin," she said. "For everything he said to you. And for what happened." Now she had my full attention. "What went on?" Heather hesitated, as if she wasn't sure how much to tell me. Then she dropped the bomb. "The honeymoon, it wasn't just a honeymoon. It was supposed to be a reset. For our marriage." I blinked. "You've been married for what, a month? What do you mean, a reset?" Heather ran a hand through her hair. "Martin has been difficult, to say the least. Planning the wedding was a nightmare. He went way over budget, ignored every limit I set, and had these crazy meltdowns over the smallest things. I thought it was just the stress of the wedding, but after we got married, it got worse." She paused, looking genuinely embarrassed. "He started accusing me of not loving him enough. Said I didn't do enough to make him feel special. He even threw a vase at me once." "A vase?" I didn't know what to say. Martin was a handful, sure, but I had no idea it got that bad. "When he started talking about the honeymoon," Heather continued, "I thought maybe if we got away from it all, he'd calm down. He promised it would be the fresh start we needed. But by the third day, he was complaining about everything. The room wasn't big enough, the food wasn't fancy enough, the snorkeling wasn't exclusive enough. She shook her head. It was a disaster. And when we got back, I told him I was done. I'm filing for divorce. I froze. Divorce? Already? Heather must have seen the shock on my face because she laughed bitterly. I know how it sounds. Believe me? I wanted to make it work. But Martin, he's not who I thought he was. And the worst part? He told me last week that he still talks to his ex-wife. What? I blurted out. Yeah, Heather said. He told me it was harmless. But I found texts. He's been venting to her about me since before we were married. He even told her I wasn't woman enough for him. That hit me like a ton of bricks. For a moment, I didn't know whether to feel bad for Heather or angry with Martin. Well, yeah, she said, standing up. I just thought you should know. You were trying to do something good for us, and you didn't deserve what he said to you. I'm sorry you got caught up in all this. As Heather walked out the door, my husband came into the room. He must have overheard because he just shook his head and said, I don't even know where to begin. Neither did I. I barely slept that night. Heather's words played over and over in my head. Was Martin still talking to Velma? Complaining about Heather before they were even married? It was like finding out there was a whole other side to him that I didn't know, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The next morning I got another call from my mother. Martin's here, she said in a low voice. He's been crying since he came in. I think you two need to talk. Did Heather tell him she was filing for divorce? I asked. There was a pause. What? Divorce? No, he didn't say anything about that. Of course not. Typical Martin, he'd never admit things weren't perfect unless he absolutely had to. I debated whether to even go over there, but I figured I might as well get it all out in the open. Maybe he needed to hear the truth, even if he didn't like it. Martin was sitting at the kitchen table, his face covered in spots and his hair pulled back in a messy bun. He looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't have that smug, entitled look on his face. I'm sorry, he said softly. I crossed my arms. Sorry for what, exactly? For what I said at dinner. I was out of line. You didn't deserve that. It wasn't the dramatic crocodile tear apology I was expecting. He seemed genuinely upset, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. Heather came to see me last night, I said, watching his reaction closely. He froze. What did she say? I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. She told me everything, Martin. The honeymoon, the arguments, the vase, everything. She's filing for divorce, isn't she? His lip quivered, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he let out a shaky breath and said, I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I thought marriage would fix things. I thought if we had this perfect wedding, this perfect honeymoon, everything would be okay. It doesn't work that way, I said. And talking to Velma behind Heather's back? What were you thinking? He jumped as if I'd slapped him. I wasn't. It wasn't like that. Velma was going through a divorce, so I thought she'd understand. I just needed someone to vent to. Vent? I said. Martin, you told her that Heather wasn't woman enough. How is that venting? It's sabotage. His eyes widened and I realized he didn't know Heather had found the texts. He opened his mouth to say something, but then he just collapsed, his head in his hands. I don't know what's wrong with me, he said through his tears. I'm ruining everything. First Velma, now Heather. I don't even know who I am anymore. I didn't know what to say. Martin had always been self-absorbed and dramatic, but I'd never seen him like this, completely defeated, as if the weight of his own choices had finally caught up with him. I can't fix this for you, I finally said. You have to figure it out for yourself. But I meant what I said at dinner. I'm done bailing you out. He nodded and wiped his face with his sleeve. I understand. For the first time in years, I actually believed him. Martin sat quietly for a long time after I finished. It was strange, it was the first time I'd ever seen him not fight back, not try to turn things around and make himself the victim. For once, he looked like he was really listening, but I knew better than to trust him completely. I'm going to say this once. You're an adult, Martin. Your choices have consequences. If you want to keep throwing tantrums and treating people like garbage, fine. But don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. I've done my part. You screw this up, you're on your own. Forever. His head snapped up, and I saw a flash of panic in his eyes. Mom and Dad don't have the money to bail you out anymore. You know that. If you want someone to finance your mistakes, look at her. I pointed at myself. And guess what? It's not happening again. Martin opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. You want to leave Heather? Fine. That's your decision. But don't expect me to pay for your next wedding or your next honeymoon or anything else. You stay with her and try to make it work. Or you figure out how to survive on your own. Either way, I'm done being your safety net. His face fell, and for a second I thought he was going to cry again. But instead, he straightened up, brushed his hair out of his face, and said, "I'll fix this. I promise." "I hope you do," I said, standing up. "Because this is the last chance you'll get." On my way out, my mother stopped me in the hallway. "That was hard," she said in a low voice. "It had to be," I replied. "If I keep saving him, he'll never learn. And honestly, I'm tired of cleaning up his messes." When I got home, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about Martin or what he might drag me into next. It was like cutting off a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. As for Martin, I didn't hear from him for a while after that. But a few weeks later I got a text from Heather. "We're going to counseling," it said. "I'm not sure if it's going to work, but we're trying." I didn't reply. It wasn't my fight anymore. Make sure to like and subscribe.